And the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay, Steve, can you start us off with some background on yourself and to begin with, where and when were you born?
Born in Janesville, Wisconsin, February 13th, 1949. My dad was Robert Manthei, a veteran police officer and security guy, and my mom, Nina Manthei, worked for Pat Dawson in Janesville and later for our church, Lutheran background.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And how many kids in the family?
There was three. Lost a brother in between myself and my younger brother, Mark Phillip. Lost him 2 months of age for a heart defect that could easily be fixed now, but back then it was terrible. So.
All right. Okay. And then did you just grow up in Janesville then?
Yep, grew up in Janesville. I spent most of the time on my grandfather's farm, grandma and grandpa's farm, I should say, and St. Paul's Lutheran School, Janesville Senior High School, class of 1967, graduated.
All right. Now, at that point, when you're finishing up high school at 67, are you aware of what's going on with Vietnam and that kind of thing?
Oh yeah, I was plenty aware of that. I had friends that had already been in there. I kind of hung around with some of the older guys, and they were already in Vietnam. And of course, it was on the news. I didn't watch the news a lot, but it was in the paper, and yeah, so I was very aware of it. I actually had my plan made probably about 10th grade about what I was going to do, and I talked to my dad about it, and I guess he wasn't kind of the usual type dad, because if I asked him, he'd tell me. Mm-hmm. And he advised me all kinds of things. He served with Patton in the European theater, so he had a vast experience. Very helpful. He was always a philosopher, always laying lines on you, which I didn't appreciate at the time, but I do appreciate now.
All right. Well, what was your plan that you formed?
Well, I had a love for horses and Arabian horses. I wanted to raise not just regular Arabian horses, but with the overall color pattern, and I wanted to make it a business. And part of my plan was to get hired at the General Motors plant too, so that I could progress with that idea. I wanted a good wife who was just worked as hard as I did, and 2 kids, a boy and a girl. And of course, out of high school, I got hired at General Motors, and the plan was in effect. And my plan was actually to enlist, but I needed to get my time in at General Motors for the union, so I'd have my job when I came back. Mm-hmm. And I met a girl, and Good Friday 1968 changed my mind, and they drafted me in March of '69.
All right. And what was your reaction when you get the draft notice? Was it much of a surprise?
No, it was no surprise. Mm-hmm. I was actually looking forward to it. I guess I was young and immortal at that time, and I was just like my father and all his brothers, and all the way back to the Civil War. People in my family were always stepped up duty, so it was in the plan. My brother also served too, but you know, we all knew we were going to.
Yeah. So the part where you didn't enlist, that was really just mostly a question of going ahead and getting married and just let them come for you when they do it?
Yeah, well, I was kind of a different kid in high school too. While everybody else was doing sports and going out with the girls, I was working on Graham's farm. Mm-hmm. So when I met this gal, she had very liked the interest. She's a country girl, and she already had horses and that, and so I decided that I would stick around, and we went to the horse shows and did things that we were going to do afterwards.
All right. Now, once you are drafted, then what's the induction process? You get the notice, then what?
Yeah, well, then we went to Milwaukee to get inducted. There was, I think there was 5 other guys from Janesville at that time, and we were inducted. And next thing you know, we were in Fort Campbell, Kentucky.
Okay. Did you do a physical in Milwaukee or somewhere else?
Physical. Yeah, we went through the whole gauntlet of physical and all the testing and stuff, and everybody passed everything no matter what.
Mm-hmm. Were there people trying to find ways to beat the system?
Oh yeah, there was some guys that actually overate tremendously. And there was a question about me because of my height, but I didn't have any reserves about that going over because of how big I was. Tall, I wasn't big, I was kind of a skinny kid, but they inducted everybody, and there was guys, like I said, that they did not want to go, and personally, I'm glad, because I only want to go with guys that want to do the job.
Right.
Just like my dad told me, you know, go with those who know and want to.
Okay. So now they send you down to Fort Campbell, and what kind of reception do you get down there?
Wow. That was kind of rude. I thought, you know, disciplines like that is nothing that I was a disciplined kid as it was, but it was a different kind of discipline. I mean, you had to do it now and do it quick. And I did notice that people that were out of shape, they I shouldn't say rode more, but they reacted with them more. I was always an athlete as far as that goes. I was a runner. I loved to run. I already did that, so all that stuff to me was easy, I thought. Because,
Yeah, and farm work is
Yeah.
pretty intense too. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're ready for that, and you're kind of mentally more ready, maybe to sort of just follow orders and that sort of thing than some other people, or.
Oh, sure. Discipline's something I had at home, you know, and I always did what my elders told me, and because I knew they wouldn't tell me the wrong way, because that's the way parents are, they tell you the right way. So I figured these guys were on the up and up.
Mm-hmm. Now, did your father give you any advice about what to do when you got to boot camp?
Yeah, he said, roll with the flow. He says, you probably won't believe it. Of course, it was totally different when I got back from there, and my dad told me, he asked me about it, and I told him, he says, it was nothing like that when I was. Mm-hmm. So the training, I think, was a lot more rigorous and harsh, I guess you would say. It was kind of a crash course, it seemed like, almost. I actually enjoyed the physical part of it. The mental part of it was book learning, you know, that kind of stuff. But the interaction where you actually had to go out and do the stuff, I actually enjoyed that.
All right. Now, were there guys that you were training alongside who were having a hard time with the discipline side of things?
They were, and you know, that's another thing you learn. I always hung around with people from our church and our neighborhood and stuff, and everybody was kind of alike. But when you're kind of like a melting pot, mm-hmm. and you're talking to guys about where they come from and how they grew up and stuff, and it was all different. And when you only had a single parent, I noticed that there was a little more unruliness, I guess you
mm-hmm.
would say. I had a kind of a different thought about what they should and what they shouldn't do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, were these people you were training alongside in your platoon, your company, were they mostly from the same area, or were they bringing them in from a lot of places?
A lot of places. They're from all over.
Okay.
It was really a neat experience, I thought. A lot of good guys. A lot of guys that caused a lot of problems. And those guys that caused problems ended up looking for the sergeant's watch underneath our platoon house, you know, which we never did lose underneath there, but stuff like that. And then if somebody got out of line, everybody paid. We usually had a duck walk. That was tremendously taxing. So tolerance amongst the guys was short. Actually, we got together and talked to these people and told them, hey, you can't be doing that kind of stuff. You know, you do something wrong, everybody gets punished, you know. And for the most part, everybody did their job. Mm-hmm. But there were a few.
Right. Did anybody actually get bounced out of training or held back to redo it?
There was a couple guys. I think there was just two in basic training at Fort Campbell. One guy was extremely overweight, and one guy was just, he shouldn't have been there to begin with. He just shouldn't have been there. I mean, some people, I realize that the Army, the military has jobs for everybody, but this guy just shouldn't be there because he was scared to death.
Okay, so he just mentally just couldn't cope with it.
Right, mentally.
Yeah.
It wasn't that he physically couldn't do it. I think the mental part of it is what. And then the other guy who was a little bit overweight, he you know, it just done him in. Mm-hmm. I think they discharged him.
Right, but most of them they get through and they move
Sure.
on. How long was the basic training?
8 weeks.
Okay, and then what do they do with you after basic?
Well, you go through the testing, of course, at the end, and at the end, that famous low crawl pit, which got the barbed wire and the live fire that you have to go through. I injured my knees on that, so both knees were pretty well swelled up, and I couldn't march in graduation, which really bummed me out. Mm-hmm. I had to sit in the bleachers, but my mom and my grandma and my brother and my fiance came down and we watched the ceremony, and it was pretty classy, I thought, you know. Wasn't really in tune with what was to come yet, still young and immortal at that time, trying to do a good job. And then, but for the most part, basic training was roughest I've ever been experienced about, you know, ever experienced as far as discipline and training.
Right. And while they were doing that, was there much reference to Vietnam, direct or indirect? Or?
Oh, all the time.
Okay.
The sergeants that were our platoon sergeants were from Vietnam, and they would make remarks all the time. And one of the remarks the sergeant said, he says, he laughed, he said, they're going to give you a machine gun. I says, why is that? He says, because they're going to see you coming a long ways away. I don't, you know, and I could laugh at that. I laughed at first, and I laughed at it then, you know, but there was more truth to that than met the eye. Yeah, so you got a lot of words of wisdom from the platoon sergeants that actually cared. And that was one of the things I noticed too, that there were some platoon sergeants, and we were blessed in that department, that actually cared about the guys. You know, other ones were just, I don't know what they were thinking, you know.
Yeah. Do you think you had any who were maybe guys who were just out of, you know, leadership schools and brand newly minted sergeants who hadn't gone anywhere yet, or were these pretty much mostly guys who'd been there already?
Mostly been there, I think. The thing I noticed too, and the sergeant emphasized to us, was the difference between a leader and a bully. And that was very helpful, because later on, when you're actually told to do something you know you shouldn't, it really helped to know the difference. And we always took that into consideration when we were in the field in Vietnam.
Right. Okay. Now, do they send you on to AIT from there?
AIT, Fort Polk, Louisiana.
All right.
Yeah, I was on profile for about I think it was a little over a month because of my knees.
Right.
But then I got right back into it, and
Well, profile means limited duty, right?
yeah, I couldn't run.
And so what did they have you do for that month?
Oh, dude. Well, I had to help with all the equipment that they used and all the training and stuff like that. I was mostly a gopher, you know, and I was helpful to do that. Like I say, I kind of liked to run. It wasn't nothing, but my knees were killing me, so I couldn't do that. But I did all the menial tasks that everybody had to do if you weren't a troop, you know. So I helped out and basically made the sergeant's life a little easier.
Did that do you any good when you got into the actual training yourself?
Well, I think it all did me some good. The whole thing did me some good. I looked at it as a training experience. It happened, deal with it, and move on.
Okay. Now, to what extent were they gearing, because this is infantry training here,
Right.
How much were they gearing that for Vietnam?
All of it. Tigerland, I mean,
Yeah.
you know.
And describe a little bit, what kind of stuff did they do to try to prepare you for what you were going to get?
Well, you had all that, like the obstacle course. You had a thing where you had to go out and escape an evasion, which was kind of fun because you were pitted against other teams to see if you could get by them and stuff like that. And then, of course, you had the reverse rolls, and that was really a good time. We always snuck by them, and we always caught the guys. So I was pretty happy about that. But I was a country boy who grew up hunting, see,
Yeah.
so in the woods, and I could read sign and. So I knew a lot about the outdoors in the woods, so I was right at home. Survival training was, they put you out there, you didn't have any food, you know, you had to make your way. Well, we killed a pig. We ate like pretty good. You know, when we got back, we were smiling. A lot of those guys were, boy, they were messed, you know, the nuts and berries thing ain't real good all the time. You know, so that was kind of good.
Right.
Taking the pain was another thing that they really pressed. And of course, with my knees, of course, I took that to heart. It was pretty intense training, and it was all geared to Vietnam.
Right.
They sang about it when you marched, you know, which was kind of interesting. But
Yeah, I mean, I encountered in a book someplace, one of the chants they were using, something about, you know, I'm going to go to Vietnam and I'm going to be killing some Viet Cong or something like that. And,
right.
and so forth. But now, do they try to teach you actually anything about the Vietnamese culture or about what to do when you encounter civilians or anything like that?
Yeah, that was part of it, not much. Where you got your training with that was from your platoon sergeant mostly, just talking to him, and we'd spend a lot of time, well, not all of us, some of us would spend a lot of time talking to the sergeant, you know, and he really, he emphasized that, and he was in the lowlands, so he had a lot to do with the villagers and stuff like that, and the thing he impressed was knowing who exactly was the enemy. They were friends by day and your enemy at night, you know, and you can't really trust anybody because you don't know. His philosophy was that the people were really afraid of those people, so they wouldn't be much help, so you had to decipher that all by yourself some way or fashion. Keep your eyes and ears open and evaluate. It was a big thing, but for the most part he said the people were good people.
All right. So basically, you're getting trained by people. They've been to Vietnam and so forth, but they're not necessarily totally burned out or disconnected or apathetic or whatever else. They see that they have a job to do to try to prepare you.
Right. That's the difference between a guy that really was into it and a guy that just was doing it because he had to do it and so he could get out. There's the guys that actually cared, and there was the guys that just had to do what they had to do to get out. And they were both those kinds. And I was fortunate both times. I had a sergeant that was experienced, and he was very upfront about everything. The second sergeant I had in Fort Polk was just a NCO type, and he got his from the next guy in line. But that was kind of an interesting thing. He was really a great guy and everything, and but he didn't have experience, but he talked the good talk.
Okay.
And hopefully, when he got over there, he did his thing too. I never knew what happened to him.
So he is one of those guys who would have been sort of the shake and bake sergeant type or whatever. He's been to his NCO school, and then they put him in a training situation to give him some leadership experience before he goes over.
Yeah, he was our platoon leader.
All right. Okay. Now, what time of year were you at Fort Polk?
Well, it was during the summer. Whoa, hot. Just the kind of conditions they said was going to have over there, only worse. I thought, oh boy.
Yeah.
You know.
But I guess coming down from Wisconsin, there was already something of a change for you.
Oh, sure. Wisconsin's has actual seasons where it gets really cold. It didn't get really cold down there.
Yeah.
Lots of bugs.
Okay. Now, what was your MOS then? What are you just?
11 Bravo.
Okay, that's just combat infantry.
Combat infantry.
All right. What kind of weapons did you train on at Fort Polk?
60, 50, 14, 16, 45, Laws rocket, grenades.
You get the grenade launcher, M79.
Yeah, we tried that too. Just all those small arms from this 50 on down.
Right. Okay. Now, were they still telling you someone's going to make you a machine gunner, or was that just at?
No,
base?
that was just at one sergeant early on. The company commander at that time was a Korean fella, and he was just a short guy, and he used to mess with me all the time. No malice intended, but I think he kind of, because you only come up to about here, you know, but he was just hard as nails, and he never made any comments about the 60, but he said, you better learn how to shoot, Manthei. That's what he used to say, Manthei.
All right. Now, once you're done, are you going to get sent straight to Vietnam, or do you go somewhere else first?
I go home for 30 days. Then I went to Washington. I got married while I was at home. Started my business, horse business and all that, and then hung out with family and friends, and it's kind of a surreal knowing that you're finally going to do the job you started out to do. And I was married on the 31st of July, and August 22nd I went to Washington.
So Fort Lewis? Or?
Yeah, Fort Lewis, and then that's where they told me there was only 3 of us that were going to the 101st, which really excited me, but I called home and told my dad. He wasn't all that excited. he had told me stories about different outfits, you know, and the 101st was one that he had brought up. So I don't know, the Screaming Eagle sounded really good to me.
Except that was kind of where the action was,
Yeah,
where
right.
they were.
Yeah, they were the top dogs supposedly, and
Now, so then, how long did you spend hanging around Fort Lewis before you flew out?
I think I was only there for a couple, 3 days.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then how did they get you physically out to Vietnam?
We left from Oakland, I believe, or no, we left from Washington.
Yeah.
And went to Cameron Bay.
Now, did you do the northern route, kind of Alaska, Japan that way, or did you go straight across? Or?
We went to, I believe it was, I'm thinking it was Japan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was the standard route for most of those transports would stop in Japan on the way over because you're going north and then back south.
Yeah, that was kind of a surreal ride actually. You know, it was real quiet. He had good-looking girls and they were always trying to give you something. And you know, everybody knew not everybody would come back alive or in one piece, and that so it was pretty quiet. You know, you had a few guys who were cutting up, but for the most part, it was kind of quiet.
Mm-hmm. Now, did you come into Cameron during the day or at night?
During the day.
Okay. And what was your first impression of Vietnam when you got there?
Stunk. Heat. You get off and it's just a smell. And it's all these people scurrying all over the place. And there is this thing where people say you can tell who's been there a while. But oh boy, that's the truth. These guys that were coming back home looked really hard. Mm-hmm. You know, and they looked at you like, you know, and smiling and, you know. So it was pretty different. That's what I noticed first was the heat and the smell.
Okay. And when you got off the plane, what did they do with you?
We had some kind of briefing, and then they actually took us off to whatever group we were going to go and made our way back to wherever we were going, which mine was Camp Evans.
Okay. Now, did you go straight from Cameron to Camp Evans, or did they send you somewhere else for Welcome to Vietnam orientation first?
Yeah, that was what the orientation thing was, right there at Cameron Bay, and
okay.
I think it was in that area.
Mm-hmm. And what did that consist of?
Oh, they told you mostly about what the operations were about and the people, and they basically covered the whole gauntlet of things, and told us that they were very upfront that some of us were coming back and some of us weren't coming back in one piece, and those that did, the job doesn't end once your tour is over. You had a job afterwards too, and I took that to heart. And then from there, that's when we went to Evans.
Okay. And how did they get you up to Evans?
I believe it was a truck.
Okay. So you're actually just driving up Highway 1?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was a cattle type truck with a bunch of guys on it, I believe, and I got into the company. Actually, I went to Charlie Company with a guy that I went through basic training with, and AIT. His name was Bob Radcliffe. Mm-hmm. So we both, and coupled with another couple guys, Bob Tarbuck and Steve Stanley. Mm-hmm. And Charlie Company is where we headed. And that was we got kind of a rude welcome. I don't know what that was all about, but.
So what happened when you got there?
Well, we were all fresh, you know, clean shaven, no sunburns, and not like they had there, no tan, I should say, and clean fatigues and everything, and we were welcomed by some of the guys, and some of the guys, you know, just kind of looked at us and smiled, you know, and that kind of stuff. So it was kind of like. We found out that we were called FNGs, you know, and cherries. But we knew that. It was just kind of weird to have the guys you were going to be fighting along with thinking of you as that. But then after I was there a while, I understood it, you know.
Now, was there anybody who kind of made a point of trying to explain stuff to you or tell you what to do?
Yeah, Sergeant White. His handle was Sugar Bear. He did, and the 60 gunner, his name was Doug Taylor, and another guy named Bob Quinn. They really helped us out, told us a lot of stuff, good stuff.
Now, did you start out just as a rifleman, or were you?
Yeah, I was a rifleman.
Okay, so you weren't a machine gun loader or something like that at that point, after all.
No, that came a little later. Doug Taylor actually was one of those guys. He says we're going to have to give you the gun sooner or later. That's what they call the 60. And of course, he gave me the same reason that the previous sergeant gave me. You know, and I wasn't funny then. I can smile about it now, but it wasn't funny then because he says you're the guy they're going to key on. So he says, and you're big to boot, so they're going to come after you anyway. So I don't know if he was helping prepare me or trying to scare the hell out of me.
So I suppose they would normally go after the M60 gunner first,
Right.
and they go after the tall guy first. So combine the two, and they only lose one man.
I don't know what the deal was, but that was the joke back then.
All right. Now, when did you actually join the company?
Well, we had about a 2-week training period where we rappelled out of a tower and went through a whole bunch of classes and actually did night maneuvers, and everybody got their turn at point and slack and the radio and that kind of stuff. And then after 2 weeks, then we joined our platoon.
Okay. But when was that in terms of time?
It was right after we got there.
So approximate date for when you got there?
August 22nd is when we got there.
You got there, okay, and so basically by early September then you're joining.
We're in the field.
Okay, and what was going on with the 101st at that time? I mean, because the Hamburger Hill fight was over by then?
Right.
Yeah. All right, now were you going into the A Shau or were you going other places?
We were in the lowlands at that time.
Okay.
All the maneuvers were in the lowlands, and BC mostly.
Mm-hmm.
It was booby traps, a lot of booby traps. We moved quite a bit. Not a whole lot of action, although the first action we did see was 27 days later. We actually got into a firefight with 3 BCs, and then we were no longer FNGs and Cherries.
Mm-hmm. All right, now who was your platoon leader at this point?
Sergeant White.
Okay, so White was commanding the platoon as well as...
Yeah, there was a change right when we got there, and then it was LT Wallace. He came in shortly thereafter.
Okay, and then who was the company commander?
Hale. His name was Hale. His handle was Wildman, and he was I think he was West Point, real hardcore. I liked him. A lot of guys didn't, but I liked guys that knew what they were doing.
Okay.
And he was battle tested, so I kind of liked him. He was a little gun ho. He had all kinds of, some of those pep talks he gave were kind of like what you see in the locker room of football games.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and by the time he was done, we were all farting and snorting, hooting and hollering, you know, and then he got us pumped up, that's for sure.
Okay. What do you remember about the first firefight?
Oh, it was actually, recon had let us know where they were coming. It was, they were racing weapons.
Mm-hmm.
So we set up an ambush, and we had a field of fire, and we waited till they got where they were supposed to get, then everybody just opened up. And they opened up for a short time, and then it was over. It was kind of, wow, it was surreal to me. I thought, wow, this, first action, and then to actually go up and to see the person and check him over, make sure, see if he's got anything valuable on him or anything, any information or stuff, that kind of stuff was I just absorbed it, took it in. It was, you don't go over there thinking that, boy, I want to kill somebody. I really didn't. If I didn't have to, I didn't want to, but if somebody's going to kill me, I was going to kill them. That's just the way it is, I knew that from what my dad told me and everything. It's kill or be killed. You go from being a very religious kid to basically a killer.
Yeah.
And it was tough transition, but you had to do it. You had to do it. Yeah, that first one was a little bit gut wrenching. And then the other thing that was really hard was the first time we had somebody wounded, and it was only wasn't a bad wound, but it was to a booby trap, but it was one of our guys. And that was bad for me. I thought, geez, finally one of our guys got it. I thought, Jesus, that's bad news. But he was happy as heck because it was superficial. He's going home. So it was kind of double-edged sword, kind of, But booby traps were bad news down there, and you really had to watch. Fortunately, we had a lot of good guys out front, and a good point man's worth his weight, you know, and that's one of the things I learned.
So you're kind of breaking into this in an area that's not as dangerous as some of the stuff that you'd be in later on.
Right, they were just prepping us the way we figured the older guys when we finally got to the A Shau, because those guys were a different kind.
All right. Now, do you then, after some time in the lowlands, do they send you into the A Shau or someplace else yet?
Yeah, well, at first they took us to Eagle Beach,
Okay.
and then they got us hot meals, showers, clean fatigues, had shows we could go to at night, and then they broke the news to us. Captain Hale, that was one of the most powerful speeches he ever made, and that's where he come up with this airborne peace sign, and it's like this. And by the time he was done, everybody was roaring, you know. I thought, boy, do we know what we're doing or not, you know? As far as that roar and stuff, we were all pumped up. We all wanted to, you know, we thought we wanted to do the job. And we were very willing to do our part. And that's one of the things I always admired about the guys that were there, because I knew they'd fight. Yeah, when you get new guys in, there's this thing. And when you go to the A Shau, and you got new guys, there's kind of you wonder, you know, and that wonder, once everything hits the fan and you see how they perform, it's a big load actually, because you kind of got your wings over these guys and hope they do the right things and stuff. It's very, it's a brutal way of living. I mean, pain every day, it's unbelievable. Stamina, unbelievable. I think about that, what we had to do and how much we had to carry, and every day. And 101st was notorious for going out for long periods of time and not coming in. I think I only came in like 7 times the whole time I was over there.
Now, did Camp Evans have a reputation as being a place where you had, you know, either slackers or bad stuff going on?
I didn't notice it at first, you know, when I got there. I was just trying to take in what I needed to take in, and it all seemed good to me. There was a lot of different, you know, race and nationality really didn't make any difference when you were in the field, and I found that to be true. But later on, there was a conflict. There was a lot of stuff going on in the last half of my tour that I didn't really care for. I'd rather be out with the guys than be back there.
Right. Okay. So, at what point? So after you spent some time in the lowlands area, and when you were operating there, were you making combat air assaults in? Were you going in by helicopter, or were you just marching out of the base or driving in trucks?
All of that.
Okay.
All of that. So not much trucks.
Okay.
It was either right out from Evans or CAs. We had a lot of CAs where they CA'd us out, you know.
Okay. So by the time you go out into the jungle, you've been into the mountains. You've done that already.
Oh yeah, we had a lot of CA experience.
Okay. And did they take you into some jungle areas and things before they took you into the A Shau? Is that, you know, on kind of your side of the mountains, or?
Yeah, we worked our way in.
Okay.
We worked our way in. That's where, well, I happened to be on the first chopper in, and we took fire, and everybody else turned back, which, you know, we just did what we had to do. But fortunately, then they came back because we got everything under control. As we moved up into that mountain, we lost 2 guys. They ran right into an ambush, and we took care of those guys. And we were moving out, and we were going up a hill, and I was right behind the AG, and then there was a gun, and then the radio guy, and then the platoon leader, and point man and slack man. And a sniper shot, and it went right by my ear and hit Pence, who was the AG at that time, in the shoulder. Went right through no major damage, but he was happy and going home. That's when they gave me the gun, and Doug Taylor was the AG then.
Okay. All right. And this is when you went into the A Shau. So
First got there, yeah.
So this is sort of late in the year now, in '69.
March.
Or is this?
We didn't go into the A Shau till later on. See,
Okay.
there was a point in my tour where I was sent back home
Okay.
because of my grandmother had passed away, and since she had raised me, I don't know how the family did it, but they got me back home. Anyway, it took me 9 days to get home because you had to get home all by yourself.
Okay.
It took me 9 days to get home, and then when I got home, I missed the funeral, and I also found that my wife had been doing some things she shouldn't have done, and left the state, and ended up in California, and squandered all my money and that kind of stuff.
Oh boy.
Yeah, it was a heartbreaker for me for more than one reason.
Yeah. Now, when did that happen?
November.
Okay. So you basically, you had been getting, sort of learning the ropes and being operating in the lowland areas for a couple of months, and then this happens,
Correct.
you go back, come back again. And then by the time you're back, has the monsoon set in so you couldn't go into the hills, or is it coming in, or?
You know, I can't really remember.
Okay. But basically, you can kind of continue to operate in the area around Evans at that point when you get back?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we were moving forward though. We were out more towards the mountains.
Mm-hmm.
We were out towards the mountains. The only thing I can tell you is it was hot and sweat was the name of the game.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't get into the monsoons till we actually got into the A Shau, I think, just about. Or at the foothills.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Because now, at what point, do you remember when Lieutenant Wallace came in?
Well, it was just shortly after we got there because
Okay.
we had one platoon sergeant. I didn't really get to know him very well, and then the next thing you know, we had L.T. Wallace.
Mm-hmm.
He was a good guy. I liked him.
Okay. How would you characterize his leadership style?
Reserved.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't really real aggressive, but if he had to, he would. I think he did things more, I'd call intelligently.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I like guys, leaders that don't rush into things, that fall back and think about what's going on and actually progress that way.
Mm-hmm.
There were a lot of times where it was boring. You know, it was actually boring. It was where guys were thinking, geez, I wish something would happen so we would break this monotony. You know, it's just, in some senses that's true, but then when it happens, you want to be on the right side. See, down the lowlands, we were basically in control.
Yeah.
I mean, we brought the heat all the time. And that's the way it was all the way up until we finally got into the A Shau. So that part of it was real good,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
All right. Now, when you're operating in the lowlands, so you're there for some months, how much did you see of the civilian population?
I only saw the villagers maybe a handful of times. We didn't go into the villages a lot. We didn't. Skirted them mostly. Met a few, run into a few. They seemed very appreciative that we were there. And of course you always try to give something to the kids.
Mm-hmm.
They get on you. I was giving them a can of sea rations or something. And they were seemed happy that we were there. But then there was some people that wouldn't talk to you at all. And we knew why. You know, if you want to know where the VC were, just find a village where nobody wants to talk to you, and then you know
Mm-hmm.
something's going on. Because it was pretty easy to figure out, actually. You once got there and kept your eyes open and understood what was actually happening, which I had to evolve into, and I'm sure everybody else did too, you know. But that part of it, you just get this feeling, you know, and most of the time it turns out to be exactly right.
Mm-hmm. And in some areas of Vietnam, there were issues with soldiers kind of going off and getting sort of too involved with the civilian population, whether it was bars or women or drugs or whatever else. Did they try to keep you away from all of that or restrict what you did?
Yeah, we didn't. No, I didn't get into any of that anyway. You know, country boy from Wisconsin. Right.
But the question is sort of, were there people who could do that if they wanted to, or did people in your unit kind of take off when they weren't on duty and get themselves in trouble? Or
you know, I didn't see that. We were always on duty.
Yeah.
That's why I say we didn't have any opportunities
Mm-hmm.
to do any. I think the most outrageous thing we ever did was got seconds in chow. You know, then they weren't going to give it to us, but we insisted.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
All right. So, you know, aside from the kind of rude interruption where you had to go home, it seems like it wasn't really too bad for the first half or so.
Right, it was more in our favor.
Yeah.
That's what I can say about it.
Okay, and then you get toward March, and the monsoon hasn't lifted at this point
No.
entirely, and that becomes one of the issues for the whole Ripcord campaign, was when they can start. But you're going off into the jungle off initially in March, all right. And what was it like when you first went out there? Was that when the
Different kind of area. I mean, different kind of topos. I mean, mountainous, and you're carrying all that stuff, you know, and it's really rough. But there were some days when you could see like we ran into a triple waterfall one day. It was the most gorgeous place I ever been. You know, I thought, wow, here missed all this. Here's this, you know, and you did see a lot of beautiful scenery actually, but you knew it was deadly. And then of course you saw the places where there wasn't a tree that didn't have a bullet hole in it, or a shrapnel or something just broke up, defoliated and stuff. It was. We were right up by the DMZ at first, I believe. It was interesting in that part, and for the most part, there was a sign. You know, they were around, but there wasn't lots of them. It was wet, leeches, all kinds of spiders. I mean, you woke up in the morning, the first thing you did was look to make sure everybody was on guard, and there, of course, you slept right there with your weapon. And then you said your prayer, and then you burned the leeches off, and made breakfast and got together.
And how long would you stay out in the field at once?
Oh, geez, I think we were out there for over a month, longest, you know.
All right. And did the company operate together as a unit, or did you split into platoons and maneuver?
Both.
Okay.
We did maneuvers where we went. One time we were on line actually, and moved through the whole area, this area they had designated, and then but it's mostly platoon, you know, and then we did some squad things, and then there was some 4-man recon, which it was always myself, Bob Tarbuck, Steve Stanley, and Sergeant Smith did that. I think we did it like 7 times, and after that I got old, we didn't do it anymore. We didn't volunteer.
All right. Now, when you were on one of those recon teams, how long would you be
Just a
your own?
few days. They drop us off, and then we had to do our thing and be back at a certain date and a certain time to be picked up.
Okay. And your job at that point was just to find the enemy as opposed to cause trouble?
Yeah, right, exactly. Find them, observe them, see what's there, and then go back and relay the information. And then whatever they wanted to do about it.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, when you're out in the field, were there kind of rules or procedures or security things that you follow to try to keep yourself safer than?
Noise.
Okay.
Big thing. Wasn't much you could do about the smell. You know, noise, big thing. Make sure your weapons are cleaned daily, twice.
Some people talk about whether you could take the ponchos or things like that. Was there clothing rules or?
Yeah, you really didn't want to. Ponchos were all right. Anything that made noise, rubber, air mattresses. They always say about canteens. Well, that's impossible to keep it full all the time because sometimes they didn't even resupply you. You know, so that. But you pack your rucksack so that as best you can, so nothing makes any noise, and you didn't want anybody who snored. You know, and that's one of the things that I noticed early on, that guys that were afraid of the dark or snored or smoked cigarettes, the guys that smoked cigarettes we just taught them that they had to get underneath something and they couldn't do it at night, you know, don't do that. And of course the guys that snored, they got them a job in the rear. That was bad news. I'm serious, boy, you don't think about that, but it actually happened. And it only happened once or twice that I remember, but it happened. And these guys that were there, they really wanted to do the job, but they just, you know, there's just certain things. And they were picky in the beginning. As the time progressed, they weren't as picky. Mm-hmm. Wasn't any guys.
All right. Yeah, about how large was your platoon when you joined it?
Oh, there had to have been 40 maybe or more.
Okay, so that's, by Vietnam standards, pretty much full strength.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the company as a whole then, were the other platoons about the same size?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
so you're over 100 men.
Yeah, it was, I thought it was normal. I didn't adhere to what they thought was, but it seemed like a lot of guys, enough guys to me.
Yeah. All right. Now, did Captain Vasquez take over the company at some point?
He took over after Hale, I believe. Well, what happened there was early on in the conflict on March 16th, actually on March 15th, we were hit from, we were in a platoon site, LT Wallace and our platoon. We were hit just before dark from a hilltop across the valley. And we didn't take any casualties, but then the next morning he sent our squad over for an ambush. And we snuck over there and peeked around and figured out what was going on, and we set up at the time. At the time, Bob Tarvik was the gun and I was the AG. So we set up and all of a sudden there they were right in front of us. You know, it was like that scene in Gunsmoke, everybody draws at the same time. Well, they got one shot off before we done him in, but that one shot went right by my ear, close. I heard it and I felt it. Anyway, we fired him up and fought for a while, and chaos, bedlam, mayhem, all that good stuff. And when it was over, one of my buddies that was directly behind us was shot in the head, killed him dead instantly, just like that. His name was Steve Stanley. He came over with us, and that was the first time that it really hit me hard. A lot of the guys, same feeling. You know, when you get close to a guy, we all got close. It's pretty tough. Anyway, we took him back over, and they came out and got his body and took him away. The next day, that was the 17th, LT got a call from Lucas Blackspade that he was coming out to pick me up. And I thought, and he told me, saddle up, Spade's coming to get you. What the heck's he coming to get me for? You know, I didn't really know what was going on. So he came out and he got me, and of course, you don't salute or do anything like that. I just jumped on his loach with him, the chopper with him, and flew off. When I got back to company area, I found out that Senator Allen from Alabama and Fred and Catherine Stanley had requested that I bring Steve home because we were good friends, and he'd wrote home about him, and we were going to go into business with each other up in Wisconsin. He dropped out of college to fight in Vietnam, and he was an only son. Very smart guy, businessman, kind of like me. I think that's why we. And he already knew that I worked at General Motors and I wanted to do the horse thing, but his thing was he wanted to open up a nightclub with entertainment and the whole 9 yards. It sounded good to me, you know. He'd run that and I'd run the horse business, still work at General Motors and stuff. Anyway, that's why his parents requested I take him home. So they sent me home with him and his body. And when I got there, of course, I met his dad, and one of the big things that they wanted to know was the truth. And I told them the truth. They didn't want no BS from the military. They wanted to know exactly. And one important thing was it a slow death or a fast death? And for him, it was instant, which gave them some comfort.
Yeah.
The thing that struck me about him was that they wouldn't let me stay in a motel. I had to come home with them, and I slept in Steve's bed, sat at his place at the table, met all his friends, played with his dog, met his girlfriend. They took me to all the places I used to take him. And then at the funeral, that was pretty surreal there too. You know, it's you do it with as much respect and honor as you're supposed to do, but I wasn't trained to do that.
Yeah.
Afterwards, I was ready to go back, and he gave me a prepaid ticket home. And he said, you're not going back until you go home, see your family. So I wasn't going to argue, you know. So I went home, knowing I was going to get into some trouble. They said that they'd take care of it, but you know, I didn't. You know. Anyway, I went home. Anyway, I had reconciled with my wife because earlier I had went to California and brought her back home, got her a lawyer and got her all straightened out, and she promised me she'd be. Anyway, she wasn't on the pill when I got home, and she became pregnant with my daughter Kelly, which was a good thing. Anyway, I went back to Vietnam late, and Vasquez was the captain there.
Okay. Now, had he taken over while you were gone?
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, I met him but one time when I first come back, and the thing about him was, boy, he looked hard. You know, I thought, oh boy. You know, I first saw him, I said, I'm gonna get it. You know, well, he didn't. He didn't chew me out or nothing. He actually just come up and shook my hand and welcomed me back. Okay.
All right.
And then he said in the morning you could go back out and join your platoon. Yeah, that's great, you know. And of course there were some guys in the rear that were had some bad cases of jungle rot and some other stuff. And anyway, I talked to him about this new guy, and he said, boy, he knows what he's doing. He says, hard guy, you know, all that stuff. I said, and everybody was happy about it. So out I went with the guys, and boy, it was just like, you know, somebody asked me one time, he said, how come you went back after all that stuff? I says, well, you got a sense of duty, and when you team with some guys like that, you know, you just want to continue and do your job. Anyway, I was glad to see some of the guys were still there with some guys with that had ETS'd out, and then we had lost some guys. They had gotten into some fights during that time, which was a kind of a bummer. Most of the guys that were wounded wasn't life-threatening or anything, so they all made it back to the world okay. But
Now, had the company gone up to Ripcord yet, or were you with them when they first went up?
just after they went up was when I got there. And in fact, it might have been right on, just close, because we were there. I remember we were there, and then we went off, and then another company came
Right.
on, and that's how they did it all
Yeah.
through. So we were on there, I think, 3 times.
Yeah. But Company C was the first one to get on
Yeah,
and be able
right.
to stay on.
Digging there, and one of the guys was digging in the hole and dug up a grenade that was somebody left there before, and he got pretty messed up, killed him.
All
Yeah,
right.
it was. It was some of those places. That's just looking around, a heck of a view. I could see why they wanted to be there. You know that. But what I didn't realize is what was out there at that time. But when we finally moved off and started humping around, wow, a lot of sign. Hair went right back up straight in the back of my neck. I mean, it was big time. We knew we were in for something.
All right. So you rejoined the company then in about the middle of April or so. That's about right, because I guess the second failed attempt to go up was April 1st, and then a little while later, Company C goes up, and they're on there. So do you fly out? Did you actually land on Ripcord to join them, or did you land somewhere?
Yeah, I came out on Ripcord.
All right.
That's where they flew me in.
Okay. And then about how long do you think you stayed there before you went out in the field?
We were there for about, I don't know, maybe 6-7 days
Okay.
more.
All right. And then now describe a little bit, sort of for the viewer, what was the terrain like or at and around Ripcord?
Well, you had points. There was Hill 902, there was Hill 805 and 1000. It was like green mountains, and big valleys. Looking at it, it looked really, really cool. But when I finally got off the Firebase with my guys and found, boy, it was rugged terrain, very rugged.
Yeah. How many rounds of ammo would you carry if you were, or with?
Well, when I carried the 60, I carried 500 and 100 in the chamber.
All right. And if you're an AG, how many are you going to carry?
As many as you can, 300 or 400. At least, and everybody else carried 100. Everybody in the platoon, and I always carried 8 grenades, 2 trip flares, wire, claymore, and 1 flare.
Now, as you're now going out and patrolling around in the areas, now were you making much actual contact, or were you just spotting signs that there was somebody else around?
We made some contact. It was almost like they were trying to avoid us. A lot of sign. Just before 902, we actually run into a fresh dug bunker complex. Boy, the hair really stood up in the back of our neck then. I mean, it was fresh. I mean, they'd know they were there because you could actually smell. And then we found a camel wire, so supposedly they tapped into it and stuff, and we just moved off. left recon to do their job, or intelligence, whoever was in there doing what they were doing. But that kind of stuff we run into every once in a while. Mostly it was old stuff, but this was fresh.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, there was sign everywhere, trampled trails. I mean, it was big time. Lots of people. Just didn't really realize how many.
Okay. Now, and then somewhere in here too, your company commander gets replaced again, because Vasquez.
Yeah, we got a new guy named Hewitt.
Mm-hmm.
Good guy. I liked him. I carried a shotgun instead, and a 45 instead of the usual, you know. Seemed like a good guy.
Mm-hmm.
Seemed like a good guy. Like I say, I actually like him. He wasn't really hardcore, but the thing that did bother us was I don't think he had a 11 Bravo MOS. He had something else,
Mm-hmm.
which we wondered about. Why would they put somebody with a different MOS in with a infantry?
All right.
So that we kind of wondered about that. But as far as the guy, he was a great guy.
Mm-hmm. All right. And so it's not too long. Let's see. I guess the 902. That's the beginning of July. So So you're out there sort of in May and in June. You're patrolling around, back maybe up on the Ripcord again at some point. Sort of on and off, on the base, off the base, in the field. Now, were you taking losses at this time? Were men getting hit?
No.
Okay.
You know, we didn't take any heavy losses, I should say. We lost some guys to booby traps,
Mm-hmm.
you know, claymores. We ran into an ambush, I guess. Them guys had set up our own claymores and used them against us.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I don't remember losing any guys from our platoon.
Mm-hmm.
I know some of the other guys had taken some casualties, but wounded, no deaths.
But the company generally is still fairly strong at this point in terms of its numbers.
Right.
All right. And how are the men holding up generally? I mean, you're out in the jungle and going back and forth for weeks on end and so forth.
Well, they were. You know, when you got to live like that, and you don't shower, and you don't, it gets to you. It's actually, it's the harshest lifestyle you can even imagine. I mean, it's unbelievable. That part of it was weird on, because you were in pain every day, you know, and you got cuts, and jungle rot was always something you had to take care of, and you had to carry an extra pair of socks, and getting resupplied during the monsoon sucked. You just dry off and it rained again. I mean, you basically slept in mud, you know, or rocks or whatever. It was just unbelievable where we could actually bed down. But we always tried to do it strategically, you know, so that to our advantage.
Yeah. Yeah. What kind of procedures did you have at night if you're making a camp someplace? How do you do that?
Well, it depends on what the terrain was where we ended up at, but we might put out a listening post. Otherwise, we circle type close as we could, so that one position can actually see the other position. Somebody was on guard all the time from all the positions, and sometimes it was a 3-man position. Mostly when we had the guys, it was a 3- and 4-man position. And you took turns, you know, and it was most of the problems we had at night were mostly with the wildlife coming in and goofing around, you know. That kind of stuff happened every once in a while, which was kind of exciting. But especially when the little apes come in, they used to come in every once in a while, because we had a sump in the middle of the perimeter, you know, when we tried to bury our cans. Well, they get in there and start digging them out and throwing them around in the nighttime, you know, and stuff like that. I remember one guy was on guard, actually got a stick, and he had I don't know if it was a K-bar or a Buck General knife. He tied it onto the end of it, and he was. I don't think he was real friendly with animals, because he stabbed one of those apes. I said that was kind of one of the funnier things that went on, because that ape let out a roar, but he didn't come back.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so there were humorous things amongst all that harsh stuff that kept people in. And there was guys that had senses of humor that were very, very good, and not always good humor, but it was humor that you needed.
Now, would you normally dig in at night? Would you?
Sometimes, sometimes not. You know, the only time we ever dug in is when we thought that something was going to be happening, or we knew something was going to happen,
Mm-hmm.
or where we moved up where somebody already was and already had dug.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were very leery about getting into the holes until we checked things out, because they had been known to booby trap that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So you had to be aware about everything. You know, basically you don't want to. I always felt I'd rather dig my own hole and get in one that somebody already else had dug.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. And did you find yourself kind of crisscrossing and going back to the same places multiple
No.
times, or
No.
always something new?
Always something new. Keep moving.
Right. Now, in June, I think the battalion had a stand down. You kind of, did they take everybody out of the field and bring you back?
There was a stand down in there somewhere.
Mhm.
I remember. I don't. I think that was the one where I drank 6 cans of warm hams and got sick and missed the hot food and the entertainment, and then we had to saddle up the next morning and go out, and I never did that again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wasn't a big drinker to begin with, you know, and some of the guys indulged a little bit too much when they get in, you know, beer, and so I never did that again.
All right. Let's take this about up. So we're gonna... All right. Now, in your story, we've kind of gotten ourselves kind of pretty well through about June of 1970. Were there other, before the events on Hill 902 on the 2nd of July, are there other particular things that happened to you in Vietnam that kind of stand out in your memory that you haven't brought into the story yet?
Well, it's just the guys, you know, that the camaraderie, the bond. There is actual bond, no doubt about it. I mean, one of the things we did in our less productive days, I guess you would say, we talked a lot. We talked about, a lot of us were into muscle cars, a lot of us were into motorcycles, and of course we talked about the girls and our plans and that kind of stuff. And so our days were filled with lots of talk.
Mm-hmm.
Quiet talk, though. Yeah.
Now, was this sort of the group of guys that you would hang out with or talk with, were those men who'd been there at about the same amount of time that you had? Or were you...
See, actually, Tarbuck, Radcliffe, and myself were the ones that were there during the Ripcord thing, were the oldest guys, actually.
Okay.
So all the rest had come in between times. We were kind of the old guys. And a lot of people cackle when I say you was the old guys, you know, you've been there the longest, you know. And we made it a point to take the guys under our wings, you know, and because we wanted them to succeed. We didn't want them to get killed, you know, that kind of stuff. So we spent a lot of time with the younger guys.
All right.
And I know that the older guys that were the next before us, when they left, it was really a good thing, you know, because they had put their time in, they had done their job, and we were real happy for them. And they were all guys, like I say, the Doug Taylor, Mighty Quinn, Bob Quinn, and Sugar Bear, and all those guys, you know, guys do their jobs and get to go home, you know, and that were an inspiration to us. Were a big thing,
Okay.
you know.
All right. Now, tell me about 902. What was going on at the beginning of July with your company?
Well, prior to 902, just before, that's when we found that bunker complex, and we got to the base of 902. It was actually the steepest part. It sent recon up to recon the hill, and we already knew that there were easier ways up, but we took the hardest way up, and we got up there, and and then we dug in. After you find a bunker complex like that, and the amount of saying we did, we figured it was a good idea, so we dug in, and it was a little bit on the tense side because of we knew how many were around that area. Well, next morning they were lobbing mortar rounds in on Ripcord. Well, it just so happens that just on the back side of 902 is where we see the puff of smoke.
Yeah.
And we decided that Hewitt decided that we should lob Laws rocket down on him, and Jack Dreher was the one that did the shot, and it was the best shot I'd ever seen with a Laws rocket. And boy, we knew that, you know, that definitely ticked him off. There wasn't any doubt in our mind. You know, we expected to get off that hill, you know, booby trap and leave it, because we knew they were coming. At least we thought they were coming, because that's what usually, when you tick somebody off, they get mad, and when they get mad, they're going to come for you. But what surprised us was that we were told we were staying there for a second night. And of course, the old guys, Radcliffe, myself, and Tarbuck, we already knew that wasn't a good idea, because we never did that. You never stayed in the same place 2 nights in a row, unless it was a very, very, very secure area, and this wasn't. So I actually talked to Hewitt, and I think Tarbuck and Radcliffe did too, but he was ordered to stay, so we stayed. I went down and dug my hole deeper, you know.
Now, when you had first gone on the hill, was anybody reusing older holes that were there, or?
There were some. I dug a new one.
Yeah.
You know, there were some already up there, and we had 2 squads up there, I believe, and the CP. And the majority of those guys were actually new guys that had never been tested. And probably a quarter of us had been tested. So
I think there were two platoons were up there, and the third one was off on Ripcord.
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, did you have enough men for an adequate perimeter for the size of the hilltop?
Well, we were strung out a little bit. That's another thing. I think we had the manpower earlier on, but we weren't getting the troops like we normally. They weren't sending us the troops for whatever reason. I didn't know.
Okay, so the companies and platoons are getting smaller by
Yeah,
this
they're getting
time.
smaller to boot, you know, and so we were spread out a little bit.
And what kind of security measures did you take that night?
Well, we put out our claymores, put everything we needed in front. I put all my grenades out, gave our 60 rounds to the gun position, and trip flares and hand flares there. We had everything that just in case, right out there. All the 60 magazines were right there. Cleaned our weapons, got ready for the nighttime. We did everything that we were supposed to do. There isn't any doubt about that. What we were lax in was people that knew how to handle a situation when it happens. That's what we found out later.
All right. So, from what you saw, your perspective, well, what then happened overnight?
Well, I was on guard duty at that time, and beautiful night. I didn't hear anything. Next thing you know, we had a radio in our position. Don Holdhausen was the radio guy, and we had him. It was myself, Don Holdhausen, and Bob Tarbuck. And being on guard, I had the radio, and I heard, and I believe it was Conradi, directly across to the west, say that he had a person in front of him. And as soon as he said that, I went down and woke up Holdhausen and shook Tarbuck, and a huge explosion. All hell broke loose. Threw me right over top of my hole down the hill ways, and explosions, RPGs is what it was. Stunned the heck out of me for a while. I got back in the hole. The first thing I did was blow up the claymores. And everybody else opened up. I mean, it was just unbelievable. More RPGs than I'd ever seen before. And one of the things I saw was I saw a GI standing there, and then it was a flash of white, and he was gone. And you know, everything happened so fast. You just see blips of things. It seems like I can remember blips of things. Explosions. I felt like a ping pong ball bounced around here. That, you know, it was just peppered, stung.
Were they getting close enough to you to use satchel charges?
I didn't realize that they were in the perimeter till a short time later. I had heard somebody on the radio, but I knew the CP had got, so I thought it was Cooper on Ripcord. It sounded like him, so I got on the radio. And I told him what had happened. And he asked about the old man, and I said, I think he's gone. They hit the CP. I said, and I told him, we need Cobras now. We need some help. And then there was, amongst all this stuff, and then next thing you know, something landed on my back, and I grabbed it, and I looked at it, and I threw it. And I spun around, and just then I saw this NDA soldier, and he dropped. I didn't know at the time, but it was Bob Smoker shot.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I knew that everybody, they were right in there with us, you know. And I got a hand flare, and I popped because I needed to know where the heck everybody was. So I popped a hand flare, and it lit up everything. Well, when that happened, it looked like everybody was looking at me. I'm just, you know, and all I see was all kinds of heads coming up. But I saw where they were, and I was hoping everybody else did too, and evidently they did. Because that's when I had Bob Tarbuck's hole was here, Sergeant Gillespie's was here, and mine was here, and they were coming up over here. And so I was lobbing grenades in that direction. That's what I was doing. And then Cooper came on the radio again and said the Cobras were coming. And boy, I was happy about that. I ain't kidding you. But the battle just kept on, you know, and they were right there with us. They had broken through on the other side, and they had taken out the Hewitt and the CP. Just about everybody was up there, I think.
Now, mostly when you were firing or throwing grenades or whatever, was that kind of toward the front of your position? Were they still coming at you, or were you had to turn around and get people behind you now? Or?
Well, our position, fortunately, the guys that were covering my back, we were all positioned so that all the area around us was covered. It was like a perimeter in itself.
Because it's kind of like a long, narrow hilltop, and you're on one end of it, or?
We were on the east side. I think it was on the east side, and the saddle where they were coming up was actually to the south of us and an angled up.
Yeah.
Because we'd already scoped out and we had the topo, so I knew what the terrain was, and that's how they came up. They came up, and they came up on the east side or the west side of the hill, where the new guys were.
Right.
And the mistake that young man made was that instead he should have just shot him. You know, but that didn't happen, and that's the price you pay for. It didn't have nothing to do with him not being competent. It had him, experience was the problem, and the same with Hewitt. Because things were done that shouldn't have been done. And two of the things that I can relate to was he actually put his hammock up at the top of the hill. I didn't know what to say about that. And then we had some NCOs that actually built a hooch with their ponchos. I don't know what they were thinking, but it was, when we mentioned anything to them, we outrank you, listen to us. We tell you, you don't tell us. Oh, okay.
Now, who was leading your platoon at the time?
Danny Smith.
Okay.
Sergeant Smith. Little Ohio boy, knew his stuff. He's one of the guys, along with Don Holthausen and Sergeant Gillespie, who also had been tested. So there was probably 6 guys out of the whole. I think there was like 32 guys, something like that.
Okay. All right. So now, how long does the firefight go on?
Oh, it seemed like forever. All the way till morning. Well, I didn't realize this, but once the Cobras came, he actually called down to us, and I told him what I would do. I told him I'd throw a trip flare as far as I could down the saddle, and another one out in front of us as far as I could, draw a line from him and open up, and that's exactly what he did. And after the Cobra came, and he worked across there a dozen times at least, just roaring. It was that close. I mean, they were right in on us. There wasn't any concern about being too close because they were right there. How else are you going to do it, you know?
Yeah.
We already knew that. So, and then everything died down, and it was actually daylight when everything, and it was surreal. All there was a lot of moans and that kind of stuff, and then everything got quiet. And I thought it was actually the morning, but it was because I couldn't hear hardly. And that part of it really, wow, you know, when you see it, you can touch it, you can smell it, but you can't hear it. You know, and everybody seemed like they knew what they were doing. We just done it before. We put out our security, and we went and checked all the guys. And Cafferty took care of the up top part, you know, with the guys and that kind of stuff.
He's a medic?
Yeah. And then we checked all the enemy that we could, but there was bodies strung out all the way down there. I didn't go down into there, check to see if they were still alive. that we'd heard that had happened before. They play dead and then they'll jump up and cause problems. So we made sure that didn't happen. And then the sergeant, of course, they brought in the helicopter to take out the dead and wounded, and then he realized that myself and another couple of guys couldn't hear, and it ain't no good having somebody that can't hear out in the boonies, so they shipped us back in the rear. And then they joined up with, I think it was Bravo Company.
Could be.
What was left, but there wasn't that many. And then there were some guys that had just gotten back from R&R and stuff who ended up going out there and that kind of stuff too. So there was a few, but we didn't have enough even for a company. So it was pretty bad, pretty bad.
All right. And then how long were you kind of out of commission with the ears and the rest?
Well, they took us in and they looked at us, and of course I was peppered with shrapnel blood, debris, human flesh. It was kind of I had never experienced anything like that, you know. It was just, I had a lot of shrapnel, but they were just small pieces, and it didn't seem like nothing. So, but the ears were the thing. Anyway, they shipped us back to the company, and we were only there for a few days. And they, of course, when they take you back to the rear, they take your weapons away. Well, we're convalescing laying around in the hooch, and the hooch next to us. This is where the bad stuff in the rear, black power, unruly types. I don't know what they were doing, but whatever they were doing, they were allowed to have their weapons, and they opened up for whatever reason. We hit the deck. You know, it scared the hell out of me just going through what I did. You know, I think it was myself, Tarbuck, and one other guy. We went and told the company clerk, hey, send us back out in the field. You know, our ears hearing came back some, not a lot, but some. I'd rather be out there than be back there. If I'm going to get killed, I'm going to get killed in combat, not in the rear. You know, that was bad news. I'd never seen that before. It was pretty pitiful. I was disgusted about that. You know, I just didn't care for it at all. Anyway, we went out to the guys, and they were on O'Reilly at the time. And because they were, like I said, there wasn't many of us left. And what there was, we were at O'Reilly, and then on the 21st, I think, Delta Company had really been in a heated battle, and during this time, we were all listening to the radio about what was going on in there. And of course, Schmitty was telling us and stuff what was happening, and then we got word where we had to saddle up because they were in deep trouble. So we CA'd in and helped them get out of that mess. And that was the last CA I was actually in. I was actually on the last bird out. We were supposed to stay there overnight after we got Delta Company out, but we got gassed. And they decided to pull everybody out, and it was almost dark. And it was myself, Tarbuck, Sergeant Smith, and I believe it was L.T. Campbell and his radio man were on the last bird out, and that was my last combat assault.
So did you miss the fight then on, or attempted fight on Hill 1000 that was about July 8th or so? Because there was a part where Wilcox had come in to take over for Hewitt, and he's with them going up Hill 1000, and he's relieved at. So did you miss all of that back at Evans, or?
Yeah, we were, see, that's part of the thing that, maybe they took us out to O'Reilly.
Yeah, O'Reilly was after that. Yeah, okay. So that's when they were on O'Reilly. So yeah, you would have missed that.
Yeah.
Okay. So for you, it was sort of, you had the July 2nd event, and then you're back at Evans for a while, and then you come and rejoin them, and that's only basically a week later.
Yeah.
Yeah. And after that, and then you're on O'Reilly, and then there's not a lot left of the company, but they need men.
Right.
And because 21st, that's right at the time when they're about to pull off a Ripcord.
Right. I didn't know that though.
And there are different companies that are down there getting themselves into various problems.
Right. Yeah, they got themselves surrounded. Buku, NVA all over the place.
Okay. Yeah. And I guess sort of when you're going into that, I mean, what did you know about the situation? Just that there's someone in trouble, we're helping them?
Yeah, that's it. You know, the rest of it you just blank out. You got to get your guys out. It's a mentality a lot of guys had, actually. You know, it didn't make any difference. You got to help your guys. You know that thing where they say you don't leave anybody behind. That's a fact. We got them out. Lost a lot of guys. One thing I know that they didn't respect us, the enemy. They should have because they bit off a big chunk. We did our job, you know. If we would have got the supplies and retrooped like we should have, I think that whole thing we could have drove them back where they came from, you know. But that didn't happen.
Yeah.
You know, and shortly thereafter, then like I say, I was out of there in 22nd of August. I was actually out in the field 9 days before I was supposed to leave.
Okay. But after Ripcord is abandoned, then does it get quieter again?
Yeah, less activity for sure. You know, and they were like ants in a sugar cube in that area, but they weren't everywhere else. They were, and actually the big buildup was right there in that area.
Right.
We just landed right in the middle of it. Something I didn't realize. I don't know if anybody else did or not. I knew we were going into some troubled area with a lot of troops, you know, because during those recon things, you know, when you see actually what's out there, but you can't do anything about it. We sat there and watched a whole company go by not very far away, you know, and you think about it and then, I knew we better not, you know, let them go. But we knew they were there. You know, you can't see that kind of many guys and think that there's only a handful, because that kind of sign and them kind of sightings on a regular basis were a pretty big indicator.
Right. Now, in that situation, you can't really even radio back to let somebody know they're there?
No, it's all word of mouth. You had to do your report when you got back.
Okay, so you didn't take a radio with you?
No, I don't believe we did. It was all timed. They drop you off and then they time you, give you a time, a date, and you had to be there.
Right. All right. Now, as you were getting there, were you counting down your days at that point, or were you too busy to be worrying about that?
I was counting down my days and worried about it.
Okay, both at the same time.
Yeah, you know, the worst thing they say is to do your whole tour and then to get killed at the end. Basically, that's Radcliffe. He's one of the guys that came in with us. So only 50% of us made it out that I came in with, just Tarwick and I.
All right. Now, so then you have about the last week before you leave. They take you back to Evans, or does the whole unit just come back out of the field?
No,
anyway?
they just took me.
Okay. And what do you do for that last week?
Watch movies, sleep, try, count the days, count the hours, count the minutes, reflect.
Okay. And now finally the time comes to go. How did they get you out?
Well, what happened was 9 days I had left, and they told me they wanted me to go back out into the field because there was so many left. I'd take these young guys out, and I, you know, I had enough of them. I told myself it ain't happening. I got 9 days left. Forget it. So I went and watched movies. And they growled at me when I came. You know, they bitched, but they sent me back home. You know, and basically, I think it was back down to Cameron Bay, and then from Cameron Bay, that was kind of neat because the pilot asked if he wanted to make one pass over. No, go straight. You know, we don't need to see any more Vietnam. You know. Anyway, the difference between the plane load of guys going back home and coming over was vast. It was hooting and hollering, and now I understand why they didn't have quite as pretty girls taking us back home as. But they all look good to me. I didn't, you know. But it was great. You know, I miss the guys. But we promised we'd keep in touch, and we have. So Bob Tarwick and I he came to actually came to my house shortly after we got out of the military.
All right. Now, when you get back, where did you land in the States?
Oakland is where I landed at.
Okay. And were you told anything about wearing, don't wear a uniform or watch out for protesters or anything like that?
Yeah, well, they mentioned a few of them things, but they didn't really say you couldn't wear your uniform. So I wore my uniform, and of course I got ribbed by another GI that was there. He says, "You actually going to wear those?" Yeah, I'll wear them. What are you talking about? I'm proud of who I am. I don't know what's the problem. Anyway, I went to Oakland Airport and I saw all those protesters standing there. I saw the MPs standing there. Didn't think nothing of it. I just marched right through. Well, as soon as I got close to them, the protesters started the taunts and their chants, and then one guy hacked on me, and I had him by the neck before he'd spit hit. And Next thing, there was a melee, and the MPs came in and cleared out the problem and told me to get going, and then I did. And on the way home, I checked, and I had lost the envelope I had with my $500 and my pictures I carried and all the addresses and stuff of my friends. So I'd wished I did a little more damage. They got off cheap. Anyway, I never got it back. Getting home, boy, big reunion, big banner in the garage. It was great. You know, as long as all my family and friends were there and the neighborhood, and I didn't have any of that protest stuff waiting for me when I got home.
Right.
Not till I got back to Generous Motors.
All right. So you go back to General Motors again. So you picked up your old job.
Yeah, after 2 weeks. Well, what had happened was I went back home, and then I was off for 30 days, and I had to finish the rest of my tour at Fort Carson, Colorado.
Okay.
Fort Carson, Colorado. That was all easy stuff. I was there with my pregnant wife at the time, pregnant with my daughter from the Steve Stanley thing, and we lived off posts. And it was like an 8-hour job, except for when they had war games and we had to go out and do the playing there. And I think that's what triggered it. Anyway, I had started experiencing these flashback type nightmares. I actually jumped right out of bed, screaming and swinging, my wife told me. When my feet hit the floor, of course, I woke up, scared the hell out of me. Did that another time. It was March 16th and July 2nd. Those were the two flashbacks I had. The last one, I actually hit my wife, which scared the heck out of me and really shook her up, and she was pregnant at the time. So I went to sick call, and that's when they told me I had battle fatigue. And they were pretty good about it. They talked about it and asked me what I had going when I had home, and I said I had a job, I had a business waiting for me, I had my wife and soon to be young child, and everything was good. And he says, well, you should be fine, but make sure you tell your veteran service officer when you get home to make an appointment with the VA so they can take care of you, and then make sure you tell your employer and your union. Okay, and I never had only but those two. So then after the 30 days, I went home. We had 90 days to where you could recover, I guess you'd say. 2 weeks. Within 2 weeks, I called back and told them about my problems at work, General Motors and stuff, and the union informed the union. Went to the service officer and told him. He made the appointment for the VA, and went back to work. And we had the horse business going. I was working at General Motors. Everything was fine. Had the horse business going. Showed all over the United States. Won everything what we showed in, and we actually had the international championship for that year. Top dog. Most businesses start at the bottom. We started at the top, which was kind of neat. Everything was going good. Well, then I went to the VA, and they told me they didn't have my records yet. So I told them everything that went on, and they said of course they'd send a letter and get back to me. Well, I got the letter, and they denied everything, which blew my mind. My knees, my ears, the PTSD, what we know is PTSD now, the battle fatigue then. Nothing. And of course my employer asked me about that too, because they were interested. They were fine up till then, but when they found out that the VA, boy, that's when I found out just who was anti. Because they actually mocked me, called me a liar, said I was lazy, didn't want to work, and all I needed was a good handshaker. And that's, and I think back at that, and I say to myself, I bet you none of them guys have an international champion of any kind, and they think I'm lazy. Plus, okay. So I was I always consider myself tough mentally and physically, just because of the way I was brought up. Anyway, I took it. And then I started, everything went good for a while, and I started having these flashback type nightmares again, and the one was Steve Stanley. And I missed one day. Of course, I'd been to my family doctors prior to that, and they both understood, and they covered me. They said they would, no problem. But we needed 3 days off, and then you needed the doctor's excuse. I missed one day, came back to work, and they actually wrote me up. When they asked me, I says I had that flashback about Steve Stanley and I had to take him home. They actually wrote me up for Steve Stanley's funeral, which just ticked me off. I got mad. And but I was smart enough not to do anything. Of course, some of the guys said to me at that time, he said, geez, you look like you were going to smack him. I said, looks aren't illegal.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I turned my back on him and walked away, but he kept on and he kept on. And then the Union steward, he made the insinuation that I would make up such a story and use Vietnam as an excuse, you know, and insinuated that I was weak, so I got no support from my union.
Mm-hmm.
And they backed me into a corner, and one night I said, the heck with this, and I walked out. Well, the next morning, I went up to my folks' house. My dad said, call a psychologist.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, call your veteran service officer, call the union. So I did. Veteran service officer, he was no good. Didn't do anything. Got the appointment with the psychologist, called up the union, got president. He said, yeah, I heard what you did. Can't do nothing for you.
Mm-hmm.
I says, why not? He says, you punched out. Quit. Oh. Then I explained to him. He said, oh, I can't, nothing you can do. And I told him, you remember my name. And I lost about 6 years of my life until I met my business failed, bankruptcy, marriage broke apart, lost all my savings, everything went right down. Close to the edge, life-changing experience in April of '74. Made up my mind that I was going to square this away and move forward ever since. Met my wife now, Maria, who now I have a son too, Josh. Turned my life around, did all the things I needed to do to square myself away, and then took the extra steps. Went in front of the VA with a representative from the DAV. His name was Paul France, and he knew what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so he directed me to a guy named Ralph Son. He was a clinical psychologist, also a professor for the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater. Best thing I ever did.
Mm-hmm.
And what I did was took basically what I consider a 5-year course with him and his associate, Robert Case from Madison. And they even went to bat with me. They wanted to go and talk to General Motors and explain to him what was going on. The thing that changed my mind about thinking it was all a mistake is when they finally did have all the evidence, they still felt the same way.
Mm-hmm.
They said it was meaningless, insignificant. Water over the dam, old hat, and our stories were junk. And it's not.
Did you ever get anywhere with the VA in the end?
Yeah, they acknowledged it.
Yeah.
Yeah, they made amends. The thing that I didn't like about that is that I thought that they should stand with me in regards to the PTSD, because I don't believe somebody can throw gas on the fire and not be held accountable. Those acts, Ripcord actually happened.
Mm-hmm.
All those things actually happened. That wasn't a lie.
Yeah.
They said, I know the doctor that I talked to wished he could do something, but he knew he couldn't. He said, we just can't. I says, why? He says, we just can't. It's not our job. Oh, really? You know, and so I just been hammering away, doing what I do, and smiling now, you know. Since, like I said, since Keith Nolan wrote the book, I've been smiling ever since.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course now, I mean, you can come to a Ripcord reunion and so forth, and you find that, okay, there's this one guy going off and trying to make a documentary about you, and other guys are talking about making a movie, and all of this. People are aware that this stuff really happened.
Yeah.
And it makes a difference.
Yeah. And you know, and when people tell you you're disgusting for making up such a story and then trying to use it as an excuse in regards to Vietnam, was that kind of stuff. When you come home, I didn't sign up for that.
Yeah.
That's another reason why I'm not real happy with the VA and the government for not sticking by the veterans, you know, because I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one, but I'm one of the ones that came out of it a lot better than other ones, so that's why I keep my mouth off.
Do you have the impression that they're doing any better now with the people coming back from Iraq or Afghanistan, or do you see some of the same things happen?
You know, I talked to some of the young guys, and they're not real impressed. The thing that I've always seen, in 1986, the University of Southern California did a research program on veteran suicide that was subsequently printed in the New England Journal of Medicine, where they said that there was more Vietnam veterans that had committed suicide than were killed in the Vietnam War. And then I saw somewhere here just recently where that number is up to 150,000 plus. So I feel bad for the veterans that are coming back from the wars since Vietnam, but I feel really bad for the veterans of Vietnam.
Okay. Well, apparently the suicide rates are pretty high for the
Yeah.
guys coming back now too. And some of it, it may just be if you put people through all of this kind of stuff, they can catch up with them.
I don't think the war, I don't think they should have drafted, actually. I think you have to have men that want to. Because if you may think you want to, but when you're forced to do something, that's always in the back of your head, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like my dad said, he joined up, of course, and all my uncles, and all the way back to my great-great-grandfather in the Civil War and stuff, and I hear the stories, and I think that the Army should be made up of people who want to, and not just because they need a job, which is why I think a lot of people went into the military today.
Mm-hmm.
They need a job. Well, if you have that mindset that you want to be that type of person, that's fine. But if you're just doing it, you don't know what you're getting into. Because even though my dad told me all about what was going on, I didn't have really come to grips with what it really was till it actually happened. And that's what my dad said. He said, you're not going to, I can tell you all you want. You got to experience and know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. Like I told you before, he was one of them guys who was a philosopher that always had little things he was say to me. So, and then they all come true, so it's, that part of it was real good. But I feel bad for the troops today, for sure. I don't think, if there's a just cause, my thing is bring them home and take care of our borders first. And because some people over there, I don't think they even know what they want. It's just out of control, I think. I don't know.
All right. Well, you've got one heck of a story, and you do a good job of telling it. So I'd just like to close by thanking you for coming in and doing that today.
Well, thank you for doing it.
All right. And that is